5% Indian in the system as compared to the proportions in 2003 of 62%, 25%, 6%, and 7%, respectively. 3 new universities have been established: Sol Plaatje University, the University of Mpumalanga, and Sefako Makgatho Health Sciences University. In addition, the good academic reputation of our higher education system has attracted over 70,000 foreign students to come and study in our institutions, mostly from SADC and other African countries. Since its inception as TEFSA, the Tertiary Education Fund of South Africa, our now National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, has awarded approximately 50 billion rand in loans and bursaries to about 1.5 million students. It has increased student bursary funding at TVET colleges from 318 million rand in 2010 to 2.2 billion rand in 2015. We've also increased student bursary funding through NSFAS at universities from 2.2 billion in 2010 to 4.1 billion rand in 2015. We, through this, affirm that the ANC government is committed to ensuring that academically capable, poor South Africans can access post-school education, and that we've responded to the concerns raised by university students in the year 2015. In order to address ongoing concerns, the following will be done in this academic year. In response to the campaign for no fee increase in 2016, government has provided 1.9 billion of the 2.3 billion shortfall created by the no fee increase agreement. In addition to this, government has reprioritized 4.582 billion rand of state funding in the 2016-17 financial year to be allocated to the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, to provide: 1, for loans amounting to 2.543 billion to assist 71,753 identified students who qualified for NSFAS funding but were either partially or not funded at all over the past 3 academic years. And 2, an additional allocation of 2.039 billion rand to ensure that any of these students still in the university system in 2016 are supported financially to continue and complete their qualifications. This funding that I've referred to is on top of the 10 billion rand that NSFAS will administer in this 2016 academic year. The following are important provisions arising from this massive injection of funds to NSFAS. As part of this 10 billion rand, over 700 million has been allocated for full bursaries in science and critical skills for the current year. This funding is made available through the financial aid officers at universities and students who are enrolled in critical skills study programs who are financially needy, enrolling in programs that include science, commerce, health science, engineering, and many others would be eligible to apply for this bursary funding. 72.9 million rand has been set aside in the 2016 academic year to provide financial aid for disabled students in universities. Thirdly, university students who meet the NSFAS means test will not be required to pay upfront payments or registration fees when registering for this 2016 academic year. Fourthly, the historic debt of all students who qualify for NSFAS has been resolved by this funding to assist existing students in the system, and the decision that no upfront payments will be required for 2016 registration will ensure access for these students. The main challenge, however, remains this missing middle. Students who are above the NSFAS threshold, but for whom university education remains unaffordable. Various short, medium, and long-term steps are being put in place for this important group of young people. Firstly, NSFAS is putting in place a process to develop a new funding model to provide loans for students that do not meet the NSFAS criteria, but who require financial assistance to access higher education. This is the so-called missing middle. This new funding model will be tested in the 2017 academic year for full implementation in 2018. Second, a Presidential Commission of Inquiry into higher education funding and other issues has been set up under the leadership of Honorable Justice Jonathan Arthur Herher to examine fee structures and mechanisms to make higher education more affordable. The Commission has 8 months to conclude its report. The African National Congress urges all stakeholders, experts, and concerned parties to take up the opportunity of engaging with the Commission and making their submissions to it. The ANC supports the principle that those who can afford to pay for higher education should pay in the interests of social justice and ensuring that we maintain the quality of our institutions. Our funding model does require fee payment, and our universities would be closed, some within a matter of weeks, some even a matter of months, if students and their parents who can afford to pay do not pay fees. So if we who can afford to pay do not pay, we will harm the ongoing existence of our institutions and of higher education. The ANC calls on students to register and start the academic year without disruptions. We call on parents and the broader community to support universities to get learning underway as fast as possible. It is, in our view, never desirable to have a heavy presence of police and security companies on university campuses. However, we believe the right of students to learn must be defended. Small groups of violent students and other violent individuals cannot be allowed to close down universities. The ANC supports university management in protecting the right of students to register, learn, and write examinations, as well as protecting the public assets of our universities, which all of us as South Africans own. We call on all concerned students, staff, and others to engage in legitimate and peaceful forms of protest, which will negate the need for an undesirable security presence on our campuses. Thank you very much.
As normal, we'll take questions if there are any, following the statement that has been given by Comrade Naledi Pandor, the chair of the subcommittee of the NEC. Are there any questions? Those who want to ask questions will normally raise their hands, and they will indicate who they are and the media house they represent. Well, I think the statement has been self-explanatory. I'll start there. Is your hand up, Koli? Yes. That's the second hand, the third hand, in that order, please. Unfortunately, our mics are having a challenge, roving mics. Ole?
Age. Is your concern that these protests will most likely get out of hand as time goes on? What is really the ANC's major concern as far as the protesting is concerned? And then do you think that the concerns of the students are reasonable, given what you've outlined here as part of trying to meet them halfway?
Neria from ANN7. Just speaking also on the free education that's been asked by the students. Last week, the meeting with Minister Bledin-Zimande basically did not come up with much for some of the student leaders who were there after walking out. And one of the concerns they raised was that you are unable to give them deadlines when you talk about issues of free education. One thing they indicated was that they would like to get a set timeline on we are going to start working on this issue at a certain point. So my question is basically, how hard is it to have a map, a way to show, okay, this is possible? How feasible is free education? And is it possible for you to give the students maybe a time frame on when this can start and the possibilities of it, of course?
The comrades with me who are from the NEC will assist with some of the responses. Firstly, if I have a child at university and I'm a working parent...
Sorry, the audio.
This mic, put this on. Don't these mics work? Okay. Right, so it means we'll have to jump up and down there. I, as a parent, if I have a child at school and I'm able to afford fees, I should pay. Parents have been paying. There are parents who pay fees. At the moment, due to a number of the actions that have been taken, we're seeing young people not registering. And a lot of parents are concerned about the non-registration of their children. We're not sure, because we've been in meetings all day, what has happened today, but it should be a day of registration on our campuses. And those who can afford to pay are persons such as myself, who are employed, who are earning a salary, and who have in the past been able to pay for their children. With respect to the new process, well, as I said, this is a process that will be undertaken by the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. We don't have a detail as to exactly what the model might look like. We believe we should be able to pilot, as I said, in 2017. It might be looked at in terms of soft loans. As you know, there are young people who have been beneficiaries of National Student Financial Aid Scheme funding who, when they work, repay their loans. There's a portion of NSFAS money which is part of that loan. It could be how that loan repayment is utilized. But I don't wish to put a model into the space at the moment. I think let's leave NSFAS to do that work. The upfront fee, non-payment, we are at this moment talking about 2016 academic year. As to how we deal with 2017 and so on, that will be a matter that I'm sure Minister Nzimande would be looking at. On the matter of peaceful protests, our Constitution gives us the right to protest peacefully, and we would ask that that be observed. We believe there isn't a need to have violence on our campuses. We believe property must not be destroyed. There shouldn't be burning. There shouldn't be threats to buildings on campuses, nor physical threats to students who might want to register by those who don't wish to see registration. So when we talk of peaceful protests, we say absolutely, you have a right to demonstrate and to protest as enshrined in our Constitution, but this must be conducted with due regard to the rights of others as well as to the content of the law of South Africa. Are the student concerns reasonable? Well, obviously, if we want to achieve equality in South Africa, we must address the issue of justice and of ensuring adequate support for access to those who do not have the means to access higher education. I think to some degree there's been a loss of the focus on those without the means, and it has become a general call for free higher education. Given the context of some of us who have means, who are employed and can pay, and thousands who do not have means, who are absolutely vulnerable and poor, attention to the needs of the poor is a major advance in addressing justice and equity. So yes, the concerns about the cost of higher education are genuine. The concerns for addressing the needs of the poor students who have talent but are denied opportunity due to financial means, this must be addressed. But we must always have regard that we have differences of means and ability financially in our society. And this must be considered whenever we articulate the need for more reasonable means to be provided for young people to access higher education. Minister Nzimande, you, according to, is it Neria, didn't give deadlines. Your meeting didn't go well. I thought it went rather well myself. I know there was a walkout, but some of the journalists may be students, so why don't we let you answer?
Thanks, Comrade Naledi. Firstly, I had hoped that the lady from ANN7 saw the statement that was released by the department yesterday about the purpose of that meeting, which wasn't a bargaining meeting, which was a meeting that I had called in order to brief the students about what government has done and also to listen to them. In the course of that meeting, they tabled 8 demands, which we responded to in full, some of them with very specific deadlines and an overall deadline. I'm not going to go into all the 8. For example, we said at the end, well, insofar as the Presidential Commission, as Comrade Naledi has said, it's got a timeline which will look into whatever it has to look into. On all the other matters that they raised, we then say, for instance, the issue of no upfront registration. We've explained what NSFAS is going to be doing, NSFAS beneficiaries and all that. And at the end, we also agreed to form a smaller committee made up of representatives from students, vice chancellors, and our department, Department of Higher Education and Training. to discuss all those matters and report back in a month's time. That's a very clear deadline, in a month's time, to come back and report. Maybe also it's important to say here that I have subsequently received a request from those students who walked out that they would like to meet with me. And of course, as a ubaba also as well, yabo. Abantwana ubalahlele emnyango. You don't throw your own children away. I'm more than happy to actually meet with them, because I have an interest that the students must always feel that we are engaging them, we are listening to them, so that they don't feel that there is no communication. But lastly, let me make this point clear. Matters that normally have to be discussed at this level are two types. There are institutional issues that must be dealt with there. And we agreed with the students, by the way, that there are matters that are institutional. No one can go to the Department of Higher Education to complain about library hours, for instance. That's an institutional matter. But there are systemic issues that they can raise at the level of the department. But we saw it fit that instead of toing and froing on systemic issues, rather it's better that you have got the smaller committee, which should actually discuss all the issues, including the broader issues of transformation that had been raised before. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions from the media? There is a hand here. And I think, there is a second hand. And the third hand. We'll start here, go there, and end with yourself, sir.
Thank you. Is it not a great date to now ask parents to pay, because now everyone gets a 0% fee increase, even the rich parents who can afford to pay like an inflation-linked increase. Now it seems like government is subsidizing richer parents. And also just perhaps your comment on the outsourcing must fall protests that you do support out of the demand in outsourcing. Thank you.
Can we have the second question?
Hi, Karen Anna from Media 24. Just as a follow-up question, I want more details on what criteria will be used, or how will parents' salaries be measured, what tests will be taken on. Simply to say parents that could afford it in the past and to be able to afford it in the future doesn't feel scientific enough. What measures will be taken to see how whether parents can afford the future?
The last question there.
I'm Silvio Pegata from Sowetan. I wanted to ask from the Minister of Higher Education. There is a working group that you appointed in 2010, which released a report in 2011 on the feasibility of free education. Now, with the appointment of this Commission of Inquiry on Free Education, have you negated the recommendations of that report? Or is it not enough to give you indications of the possibility of feasibility of free education? And also on the issue of historic debt, understand that during the FISMA, even last year, there are many people, even community members, who supported the FISMA score. Because you have people who still have their certificates, degrees, and diplomas withheld by universities because they have historic debt. Many of these people is people who were deserving of getting NSFAS funding, but who couldn't, and therefore couldn't pay their fees, but were allowed to finish their qualification. But now they cannot be able to ask to find employment because of their qualifications, which are still withheld. So I wanted to ask you, when you talk about the issue of historic debt being resolved, are you saying the students who are still at university now, all of their debt is going to be cleared if they deserve NSFAS and they apply for it? And what also about the people who have already exited the university?
Only assent.
Just a quick one from my side. On the figures that have been given out here, which I think in total, if I'm not mistaken, Minister, they amount to about 10 billion rand. Are there any new figures, perhaps, that we're not aware of, that perhaps would not have been mentioned by the President in his January 8th statement, for example? Thank you.
Okay. We'll answer.
We'll start with the last two.
Okay.
And I'll come back on the
Sure.
Yeah, let me start with the very last one. Yes, there is new money. In essence, if we are counting money that is in NSFAS, it's 10 billion for this year, which is money allocated from the fiscus. Last year it was 9.5 billion. So this year it's reached 10 billion. In addition to that, there are these two amounts that Comrade Naledi spoke about. The 2.5 to deal with historic debt from 2013, 2014, 2015, plus another 2 billion. If you combine the two, it makes about 4.5, 4.6 billion, which is for continuing students who are in the system. So NSFAS, in fact, the CEO of NSFAS put it nicely in one meeting. He said, when the president spoke, his budget jumped by 50% in one weekend. So there is new money. This 4.6 is new money. We are not counting the fees one because that's separate. But for NSFAS and NSFAS kitty, there is 4 billion. If we calculate from last year, NSFAS 9.5, and then there is a further 500 million new for this year, plus this 4.5 billion. Am I making sense? So there is new money, definitely new money. Yes, it will include students who have left, but who had passed, but left because they do not have money for 2013, 2014, 2015. Well, it would be 2013, 2014, I guess. They can go back to their institutions and be able to be assisted by this amount of money and be able to continue if they meet the academic criteria. Also, I want, what was the related one, by the way? Yeah, those who have exited. And the working group, no, is it not the commission? By the way, I also, Comrade Naledi, need to remind the media. The reason why we are starting in 2013 is because in 2012 we did give such relief from the National Skills Fund for students who were actually owing, I think if I'm not mistaken, from 2009 or 2010. We gave that relief, up till 2012, which was a once-off. That's what he said. It was a once-off relief in order to allow students to be able to complete. Partly also that's what informed us, by the way, in turning your final year, that if you pass your final year, you graduate, we turn that into a bursary. It doesn't become a loan because we're also trying to facilitate exit. No, the report, just the last one, the report that we had done is not negated by the Commission. In fact, we think that report will make the work of the Commission much easier. We are actually going to be submitting to the Commission that report, as well as the study that was done by the now Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, before he was, on reviewing university funding. So we're going to be taking all those reports that we've done and placing it before the Commission. It's not negated at all by these developments. I think I've answered everything. Thank you.
On the matter of the benefit to everybody, if there's no increment, no increase, then clearly everyone benefits. But if you have been paying, as I have and many other parents, for your children to study at university, we don't believe that this year you should say, right, I'm not going to pay, even though I can afford to. This is why we've said those who are able and have the financial means to pay should do so. I think many of the student organizations that have been part of the campaign have said we are talking about poor students. We're not talking about those who have the means to pay, whose parents are wealthy and who can afford, or parents who might not be wealthy but have been able to meet the costs, either through having prepared it or some other means. So obviously, yes, everybody will benefit from no increase, but those who can pay and who have paid previously, who don't fall in the categories we've described here, we would appeal to them as the African National Congress that they should continue to do so, because the more of us who make a contribution, the greater the attention we can give to those who are most poor in our country. Oh, by the way, you asked as to, I don't think, it's the means test is used for everyone. Because some of the parents, I have children at university, and when the fees are stated, if we can, we pay. Sometimes late, sometimes not, not late, but we pay. So we don't go through a means test. And we are appealing, as the African National Congress, as I said, to those of us who are able to pay to continue to do so. We know who we are. We don't have to be told. You don't have to go through a means test. We know who we are. We know whether we've borne this fee burden before. And there are many that we know cannot. I've come across very talented young people who've done extremely well in the National Senior Certificate, have no means whatsoever. We've got to ensure that those children are able to access higher education. And by my making a contribution, I am making a contribution to those talented children whose families are totally poor, that they have an opportunity to study at universities. And I think we know who we are. We search our souls, and we know whether we can pay or not.
I think all the questions have been addressed, and it doesn't look like there are any new questions. Let me take this opportunity to thank you all.
On the matter of outsourcing, I think this is a demand that has been amalgamated with the demands on fee payments. Clearly, the African National Congress supports us ensuring in all institutions that employ that we pay fair living wages to all people who work in public institutions. I, as a member of the subcommittee, do not have a resolution on insourcing or outsourcing in higher education. So I cannot, as an individual, take a stand on this. We had an insourcing resolution in Mangaung on health, not on education. So on health I could speak. But I can, without any fear of contradiction, say that any institution that is using labor brokers to treat workers unfairly must be confronted by workers and their representatives, and the interests of those workers and their receipt of a living wage must be addressed.
I think that was a final note. Let me thank you. Let me thank all of you for having heeded our call. Until next time, the press conference will adjourn. Thank you.
Well, very good afternoon to you. With News Live coming to you slightly later today because of the briefing from the ANC Subcommittee on Education, where really what's been described as urgent matters affecting education have been discussed.
Yeah, we see the ANC Subcommittee on Education there, the Minister of Higher Education, Bladen Zamande, taking the opportunity to stress, of course, the numbers involving the total contribution from government to student fees. And once again, he said here at this press briefing, breaking down the 10 billion rand set aside for NSFAS this year, saying that a 4.6 billion rand set aside for the student fees is completely new money, and that is new money dedicated to the NSFAS for its kitty. 2.5 billion for the 2013, 2015 and 14 historic debt component of that academic year, as well as another 2 billion for continuing students in that system. We also just heard Naleli Pando there speaking about outsourcing, and she's been quite adamant, saying that clearly the ANC does not support conditions that are unfair to workers, but cannot take a resolution alone as an individual, she says, on outsourcing. But we'll have more details on that press briefing when we come back. Stay with us.
COSA, Southern Africa's leading distance learning institution, accredited, affordable and accessible management education programs, higher certificates, diplomas, undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. Register at ManCosa and be part of Southern Africa's leading private business school. Visit our website mancosa.co.za. ManCosa, management education reimagined.
Health Talk, your show on health practice.
The people being empowered with knowledge so that they can change their behavior and reduce their risk of being sick.
How serious is stress at work?
If we don't address workplace stress, that negative stress, then it can lead to burnout and it can lead to depression.
How does absentees affect companies?
The one that's really problematic for employers is the one that is unscheduled.
How can companies organize their wellness program?
Health promotion mustn't just be a one-size-fits-all type of approach. It must be customized based on understanding of the unique needs of that particular organization.
For health tips that will help you to adopt healthy living with Dr. Sillo Mutawung on Health Talk every Saturday.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. Taking a look at your headlines. Registration halted at the Mahikeng campus of the Northwest University.
And then from lower oil prices to higher telecommunication share prices, we take a look at the impact of sanctions being lifted on Iran.
Then coming up in your sports, world tennis rocked by match-fixing allegations.
Registration at the Mahikeng campus of the Northwest University has been halted until further notice. Protesting students have blocked the entrance leading to the university's Great Hall, where registrations are being administered.
More than 1,600 students face financial exclusion at the university. So chanting slogans and singing struggle songs, the students are vowing that no one will be allowed to register until their demands are met. They say it's free or nothing. Students are demanding that those that are excluded from student bursary fund NSFAS need to be assisted. The university says it simply cannot afford to fund all needy students. It says it needs an additional 91 million rand to meet the demand. Students further want all historical debts to be cancelled. Well, as the 2016 academic year got off to a start, so are the unscrupulous entrepreneurs wanting to cash in on unsuspecting students. The Department of Higher Education says it's aware of a series of bogus colleges in Johannesburg. Owners at these institutions have been distributing pamphlets across the city as students look for placement. Authorities are at this hour in downtown Johannesburg clamping down on these colleges.
Well, learning and teaching at a number of schools in Port Elizabeth's northern areas ground to a halt again today as disgruntled parents kept their children out of school in protest. Now, the closures took place despite efforts by the provincial government. Parents have vowed to keep the schools closed until the Eastern Cape Education Department meets their demands. This includes the provision of sufficient teachers at schools, especially in specialist subjects, and teachers for children with special needs. Parents say the Department of Education has failed to deliver on its promises since 2010.
Another complete shutdown of the 53 schools in the northern areas. Parents publicly stating their grievances. But it is the learners who are affected.
I like the school to please open because I like it at school. The school is very excellent. I want to learn more because I want to succeed in grade 12.
I'm very sad because I want to learn more. I want to make my parents happy, and they do their best so that I want to learn more from them, and I like that the school will open for us.
The Northern Areas Education Forum says protesting parents have lost trust in the Department of Education.
And the biggest problem we sit with is the trust of the people in the system. The trust that the people say the Department of Education cannot be trusted with the education of the children, and that need to be looked at very seriously. Even if we had a document from the President on last Thursday, the people will never listen to us. The meeting was very volatile, the people are angry, and we need to get the trust of the people back, believing that the government of the day is the government of the day there for the people, and that's what we're sitting with.
Another meeting with education authorities will be held in a bid to resolve the impasse.
We would like to appeal to all the parents to allow learners to attend school. We are not taking anything away from what they are raising because we believe that these are authentic demands. However, we know that they not only affect them as the northern areas, they also affect all of us in Port Elizabeth and in the Eastern Cape.
Last week, the Education Premier requested parents to stop closing schools.
There are schools like the school I've been to, Galvandale. They are fired up. But if somebody else says that we're going to call for non-attendance to schools, what about those who want to go to school? And I think it's really in that context that we say that we would wish the community or those who were part of the meeting that decided that they will call or they will shut down schools to rethink.
Other interventions include the appointment of 300 non-educational staff to more than 260 schools throughout the Expanded Works program in conjunction with the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. Janine Lee, SABC News.
Well, it appears the question of free education between protesting students and government will drag on for some time to come. The ANC Subcommittee on Education has just addressed a media briefing calling on those who can afford to pay the fees to do so. Well, for more on the briefing, we cross to our reporter, Tumole Mokhlade. Tumole, good to talk to you. So, urgent matters discussed, and really all stakeholders have been urged to engage with the Commission on this inquiry. Talk us through some of these urgent matters.
Well, that is correct, Natasha. Thank you very much. As far as the committee set up by the ANC is concerned, one of the most urgent matters is an appeal for students of higher education institutions to go back to higher learning and to desist with the protests that have been ongoing. And one of the things that Higher Education Minister Bladen Zimande appealed for was that we cannot have a situation where we continue to see a police presence, as he put it, out on institutions of higher learning, because he says that this is not what the police are there for, and therefore those students who are still unhappy with the provisions that have been set aside and that have been put in place to try and ensure that there's a gap filled between those who cannot afford to pay for registration and institutions of higher learning, therefore being denied their right to quality education, and those who perhaps have the means and have got support to go and study, that those who continue to protest do not infringe on those who want to go and study. This was a very, very strong message. But as far as some of the provisions that have been made, the committee here making sure that they emphasize that even in his address at the ANC's celebrations earlier this year, President Jacob Zuma taking time to basically highlight what has been set aside in response to the Fees Must Fall campaign, as the students took to the streets, took to the campuses right across the country, making their voices heard to say that higher education cannot be exclusive based on basically a person's financial background. Now, as far as some of the major announcements that have been made, in response to the campaign for no fee increases, in 2016, now government has provided 1.9 billion rand. This is according to the statement that was read out here by the committee for the 2.3 billion shortfall that has been created by the no fee agreement. So government will provide 1.9 billion to try and cover the 2.3 billion shortfall that has been created, basically the gap where government agreed that there will be no fees for this financial year. And now government is looking at means to try and, of course, finance a financial model to see how it can agree to students' additional demands, that there be no fees going forward for next year as well. So these are some of the, some of the major things that came out of the briefing today.
All right, Tomahole, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Our reporter Tomahole Mohladi live from Johannesburg at the ANC's subcommittee briefing on education.